Imagine a medieval village, not ravaged by typical warfare or familiar pestilence, but gripped by an unseen terror that twisted minds, ignited burning sensations in limbs, and led to grotesque hallucinations. For centuries, this horrifying affliction, known chillingly as St. Anthony's fire, swept across medieval Europe, leaving a trail of madness and death that defied all understanding. What dark force caused entire communities to succumb to such a bizarre and agonizing fate? In this episode of Echoes of Time, we delve into one of history's most perplexing medical mysteries, unraveling the chilling story of widespread suffering often dismissed as divine punishment or witchcraft. For generations, the people of medieval Europe lived in constant apprehension of this elusive menace. It was a time when the invisible forces of the world held immense sway, where the line between the physical and the spiritual was impossibly thin. When the symptoms of St. Anthony's fire first manifested, they did so with terrifying intensity. Early accounts paint a grim picture of victims caught in a relentless cycle of torment, their bodies racked by an unimaginable agony. We hear whispers through time of individuals dancing uncontrollably, their movements convulsive and involuntary, a macabre ballet performed under the shadow of a cruel, unseen hand. These were not dances of joy or celebration, but of desperate, agonizing suffering, their limbs twitching and jerking beyond their control. Then came the screams, piercing, guttural cries that tore through the quiet medieval nights, testaments to a suffering so profound it seems to emanate from the very depths of hell itself. Accompanying this physical torment were visions, horrific, grotesque hallucinations that plunged sufferers into terrifying landscapes. They described seeing infernal landscapes, demons clawing at their flesh, their minds fractured by a reality that no one else could perceive. The world became a canvas for their nightmares, painted in vivid, terrifying detail by an internal artist of malevolence. These were not just physical ailments. They were a total assault on the human spirit, twisting the very essence of what it meant to be alive. The burning sensation in their limbs was not a metaphor. It was a visceral, searing pain, as if internal flames consumed their flesh, leading, in its most advanced stages, to the horrific spectacle of gangrene, where limbs blackened, withered, and eventually fell away, leaving behind a horrifying testament to the disease's destructive power. In an era dominated by superstition and a profound belief in divine intervention, there seemed only one possible explanation for such a plague. Communities, desperate for answers, sought solace and understanding in the religious frameworks that governed their lives. Some attributed these terrifying symptoms to outright demonic possession, believing that malevolent spirits had taken hold of the victims' bodies and souls, forcing them into their grotesque contortions and tormenting their minds with hellish visions. Others saw it as a direct curse from St. Anthony, a saint often invoked for protection against fire and disease, but whose perceived wrath could be equally devastating. Pilgrimages were undertaken, prayers were offered, and desperate pleas were made to the heavens, all in an attempt to appease an angry god or banish the insidious evil that seemed to have descended upon them. Yet, despite all fervent prayers and desperate rituals, the agonizing plague persisted, its victims multiplying, its dark shadow lengthening across the land. The mystery deepened with each passing century, shrouded in fear and misunderstanding, its true nature hidden in plain sight. For centuries, historians and scientists grappled with the true nature of this medieval scourge, struggling to reconcile the historical accounts with any known medical condition. The lack of a definitive explanation only fueled the myths and theories that surrounded St. Anthony's fire, consigning it to the realm of inexplicable horrors. But the march of scientific inquiry is relentless, and the silent culprit, though patient, could not remain hidden forever. It wasn't until much later, as the dawn of modern science began to illuminate the dark corners of the natural world, that researchers began to connect the seemingly disparate dots. The true scientific explanation, often overlooked or simply beyond the understanding of the time, lay hidden not in the supernatural, but in the very staple of the medieval diet: rye bread. The discovery was both simple and profound, revealing a silent culprit lurking within the fields that sustained life. The terror, it turned out, was not a demon, but a parasitic organism, the ergot fungus, scientifically known as Claviceps purpurea. This insidious fungus would infect rye grains, particularly during wet seasons, transforming the life-giving staple into a deadly poison. As the contaminated rye was harvested, milled, and baked into the daily bread that formed the bedrock of the medieval diet, the potent alkaloids produced by the fungus were ingested. These compounds, insidious and powerful, possessed the capability of inducing severe neurological and circulatory effects, which perfectly mimicked the psychotic episodes and led directly to the gangrene described in such horrifying detail by medieval chroniclers. The hallucinations, the uncontrolled dancing, the agonizing screams, they were not the manifestations of a curse, but the direct, brutal consequences of a fungal toxin silently at work within the human body, twisting minds and slowly destroying flesh. However, the narrative isn't as simple as a purely poisoned loaf, nor is the history of St. Anthony's fire a singular, straightforward tale of cause and effect. The historical debate surrounding this medieval affliction encompasses a range of various compelling perspectives, each adding layers of complexity to our understanding. Was it purely a matter of toxicology, a simple case of ingesting a fungal poison? Or did broader societal conditions, themselves harsh and unforgiving, exacerbate its impact, rendering populations profoundly more susceptible to its ravages? Some scholars propose that the widespread suffering was intensified by the prevailing conditions of the age. Periods of famine, a recurrent nightmare in medieval Europe, would have left populations already severely weakened, their bodies depleted of vital nutrients. Poor sanitation, a pervasive reality of medieval life, contributed to a general state of ill health, making individuals more vulnerable to any disease, let alone one as potent as ergotism. Nutritional deficiencies, stemming from limited diets and the sheer scarcity of food, further compromise the immune systems and overall resilience of the populace. In such a fragile state, even a moderate amount of contaminated rye could have devastating effects, turning a potentially localized poisoning into a widespread epidemic of unprecedented suffering. These pre-existing conditions, far from being separate issues, likely acted as a grim amplifier, turning a dangerous toxin into a catastrophic force. Moreover, the historical record itself presents a challenge, prompting some scholars to suggest that not all reported outbreaks were solely instances of ergotism. They proposed a possibility of misdiagnoses, arguing that other ailments, with symptoms that might have superficially resembled St. Anthony's fire, could have been incorrectly identified as the dreaded ergot poisoning. In an age devoid of sophisticated medical diagnostics, where understanding of the human body and disease was rudimentary at best, differentiating between various conditions with similar outward manifestations would have been incredibly difficult. This potential for misdiagnosis further complicates the historical record, blurring the lines of cause and effect and making it challenging to definitively ascertain the precise nature of every reported outbreak. The medieval physician, struggling with limited knowledge, might have seen the burning sensations, the convulsions, and the madness, and attributed it all to the most fearsome disease he knew, even if another malady was at play. Perhaps one of the most intriguing and unsettling perspectives explores the profound psychological ripple effects that such a terrifying and mysterious illness would have had on medieval communities. In an era dominated by superstition and an ever-present fear of the unknown, the sheer terror of St. Anthony's fire could have become a potent psychological weapon in itself. Scholars argue that mass hysteria and collective delusion could have amplified the terror, potentially even manifesting physical symptoms in those who were not physically poisoned. When an entire village witnesses their neighbors succumbing to madness, visions, and agonizing pain, the psychological strain would be immense. Fear could spread like wildfire, causing individuals to genuinely believe they were afflicted, leading to psychosomatic responses that mirrored the true physical symptoms. The power of collective belief, fueled by the inexplicable nature of the illness and the religious interpretations surrounding it, could have created a self-reinforcing cycle of terror, blurring the lines between true physiological illness and a descent into madness induced by shared dread. It is in the intricate weaving of these various threads, the insidious fungal poison, the widespread societal vulnerabilities, the challenges of medieval diagnosis, and the potent psychological impact of collective fear, that we begin to truly understand the complexity of St. Anthony's fire. These intertwining factors created a truly hallucinogenic plague, an epidemic that did not merely sicken the body, but systematically attacked the mind, blurring the lines between a tangible physical illness and a terrifying communal descent into madness. The suffering was real, the symptoms were horrifying, but the exact contours of its spread and its full impact remain a subject of ongoing historical and scientific inquiry. It teaches us that history's diseases are rarely simple, often reflecting the deep-seated vulnerabilities and beliefs of the societies they afflict. Join us as we continue to peel back the layers of this forgotten epidemic, revealing the dark secrets hidden in the fields of rye and the tortured minds of medieval sufferers. It is a story not just of a disease, but of humanity's struggle against the unseen, the misunderstood, and the terrifying forces that can reshape existence. What other hidden terrors, born from the very earth beneath our feet or the deepest corners of the human mind, still echo through the forgotten pages of history, waiting for us to understand their true nature?